Whenever you're ready. Yep.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the panel about Harvey Pekar and his artists. It has a formal title, but I can't remember what it is. Working our way across, we have Ed Piskor, who is working on a long format graphic novel with him. Dean Haspiel, who's just done the Quitter with him, which will be available soon. Myself, who you probably all recognize. Josh Neufeld done the cover of the program, so you can see his work with Harvey quite a bit this weekend. So let's see where we start. I'm Mike Rhode, a friend of Dean Haspiel, an occasional writer about comics. Not writer of comics, writer about comics. So let's, Harvey talked a bit last night about his, starting with Robert Crumb, who's probably still the most famous collaborator we have.
Yes.
Was most of the audience here last night? Maybe you could just go into that again real fast so people get the background of how you started.
Well, I met Robert Crumb in 1962, and when I saw his work, I realized that my opinion of comics, which had been low for a long time, since about the age of about 11, was probably incorrect. I thought they were intrinsically a limited medium, and that the reason I thought that was because that, when I got into into the later grades of elementary school, I could figure out the story's endings before I got to them because they were so formulaic. And so I gave up reading comics. Started reading the mad stuff from the 50s. And then in the early 60s, Crumb moved into my neighborhood from Philadelphia. So we had in common that we were both jazz record collectors. And I got to look at his cartoon work, and I was blown away. I mean, because here the guy was actually doing stuff that was meant to appeal to adults, not kids. And it occurred to me that comics could do anything. You could do anything in comics that you could do in any other art form, and that comics were being used in a very limited way. So that like superheroes was the main genre of comics. It's not the main genre of movies or anything else. So I figured probably, comic book companies were satisfied with the sales they were getting from superhero comics. They didn't want to try anything else. And there were tons of things that you could do in comics that weren't being done. It was a very unexplored medium. And I couldn't draw, but I wanted to get in on that. I figured that out, and I wanted some credit for it. And I figured that I'd be known as an innovator or go down in history. So, anyway, so I kept up with what Crumb was doing when he became a hippie idol and everything like that, and moved out of Cleveland, moved to California. He used to come back to Cleveland for visits, and he'd stay at my house. One time in 1972, I had been theorizing about comics and the kind of comics I'd like to do. I thought I'd like to do autobiographical comics because it seemed like whenever I wrote a narrative, it was the closer I came to the truth, the better it was. More impact it had. So I wanted to do autobiographical comics, and I wanted to do stuff about the dull routine of my everyday existence. And so I did some scripts for Crumb when he was up there. I'm saying a storyboard, style. And I showed them to him, and I asked him about, what he thought of them. And he liked them, and he said he'd like to take them home and illustrate them. So, okay, so that already put me on the map. That's just instant legitimacy. When a guy of Robert Crumb's stature illustrates your work, if other people sit up and take notice, So, when these other guys, and Crumb got some of his artist friends in California to illustrate my work too, started talking about it. Really nice. So then guys in Cleveland started to get word about me, and I started writing a whole lot of more comic book stories, more than, Crumb had his own stuff to do. It wasn't put on her solely to illustrate my story. So I tried to, I eventually got into publishing my own comic, which was a pretty long comic by those standards. It was about 60 pages. And I tried to get a group of guys together, a group of artists, a little women too. A group of artists together that would, that like a pool of people that I could, give stories to illustrate to. And so, I don't know, that's about where I'm at.
Okay, well, let's talk to the people that are actually here at the table. Josh says he's the longest-serving art illustrator at the table, so maybe, maybe Josh, maybe you can talk about how you started working with Harvey and how the experience.
When I came back from traveling, backpacking around Southeast Asia and Europe for a year, I had, during that time, gotten into alternative comics and was really excited when I came back about working in the industry, but I had no confidence as a writer, and I started sending my art to various places like Duplex Planet Illustrated that came to Greenberger's work, and to Harvey, just to see if he needed any artists, and sort of pimping my own stuff. I can draw as good as the guys who are working with you. It was kind of, I'm sure artists are familiar with this. You sort of send your stuff out, and you assume 90% of the time you'll never hear anything back. But about, a week later, Harvey called me up on the phone, which was the last thing I expected. I thought I'd get a letter back or something. And he said, yeah, let's work together. When the time's right, when I think of a piece that's right for you, I'll give it to you. And that really made my year. So it did take a while for us to actually do our thing, our first piece together. I think you were, at the time, we were still promoting our cancer year and getting over having cancer, et cetera. So I think the first piece we worked on was a piece for the Village Voice in '95. And then it's been sort of steady, short pieces here and there in the last 10 years or so. It's been great, and he really inspired me to start writing my own work as well. So
I would strongly recommend the audience pick up Josh's work on travel stories. It's an excellent book.
A few perfect hours.
There you go.
It was actually self-published. It was here.
Well, then buy it directly from him. All right, let's go over to Dean now, because Josh, you were with me. So.
No, not. Okay, this is about meeting Harvey for the first time, basically? Right, okay. Well, Josh and I had gone to high school together and known each other for a very long time. One of my favorite things about my relationship with Josh is that we challenge each other creatively. And I think, well, let me backtrack for 1 second. When we did a comic book together, but I'll get to that in a second. It was called Keyholes, a two-man anthology, and Josh told his stories in half the book, and I told mine. I had a more mixed bag, and then Josh criticized that. He didn't like the fact I was doing crime and superhero and autobio and everything else I was thinking of that week. And he was like focusing on like one or two things, like travel and autobio. So then by issue 5, he basically told me to stop doing that and just do autobio. Anyway, so, but we know each other a very long time and we challenge each other creatively, and that's really cool. And I don't think I've drawn one professional page without showing it to Josh first, actually, in my entire career.
I'm only allowed to give approval, no criticism.
Yeah, you might tell me you might have a suggestion, but it's usually a weak suggestion. But I appreciate that you feel so strongly about certain things. So,
You saw that first piece I did with Harvey, and that kind of got your...
Well, I'm going to get to that. One thing was, I grew up reading superhero comics, like a lot of people won't admit, and I still like superhero comics, but in the 80s, at some point in the 80s, I walked into a store called Soho Zat in Soho, New York, and I discovered Yummy Fur and American Splendor, and it kind of blew my mind because I didn't know that you could also write and draw your own comics, number one, but also they didn't have to be from Marvel or DC. You know, they didn't have to be franchise superhero comics. So that kind of like threw me for a loop. And then I started, you know, taking my ideas more seriously, and then that developed into Keyhole with Josh Neufeld. So as part of the challenge that Josh and I always had with each other, competition, Josh had hooked up with Harvey to do some American Splendor. I was like, I draw better than Josh, you know. So I took whatever I had drawn that year and sent Harvey a package of my best stuff, and I never heard from him. I didn't get a phone call or a postcard. I got nothing. And I was perplexed by that. I was like, that maybe didn't get, you know, he obviously didn't get the mail. So then, I guess Josh had one up on me, and I then drew a 2-page story. I wrote into a 2-page story called American Dilemma.
I think what happened, just to finish, is that you asked me to ask Harvey about your stuff, and I finally got the nerve up, because I was still new working with you, and I didn't want to piss you off, so I'm like, did you get something from a friend of mine, he asked you, and you were like, yeah, and stuff is too stylized.
So, I did a comic book, a 2-page story for Keyhole called American Dilemma about that problem, which was, I sent this work off, and I imagined in my paranoia how Harvey was reacting to it, which was too stylized. I showed examples of the stuff I showed him that I never got a response to. And it was basically an autobio piece, you know, from disguise as kind of like a letter to Harvey begging for work. So I publish this in Keyhole, I send it, and I never hear from him. And finally, like 3 or 4 years go by, and I get a phone call from what I thought was a parody of Harvey Pekar calling me to give me a gig, a 1-page job or something. And I'm talking to this guy, and he had woken me up, first of all, so I was a little groggy. And it's kind of like I said, it's a parody. He's like talking like, hey, don't you want to make some bread, man? I'm like, I'm thinking Josh is calling me up. For some reason, 4 years later, it's like pulling my leg, like this joke, you know, that somebody reappears. And I keep saying to this guy, are you sure that you're Harvey Pekar? Is this Harvey? Is this really Harvey? And finally, Harvey starts screaming at me, tells me to fuck off, and hangs up the phone. And I'm like, so now the joke turned mean, you know? So I call up Josh, and I'm like, Josh, you call me up? And he's like, what? No, what are you talking about? I'm trying to think who else could have done it, and he asked me to describe the conversation, and I described it with some of the verbiage he said. He said, that was Harvey. So I said, can I get his number? I guess I have to call him and apologize. So he gives me the number, and I get Harvey on the phone, and I start to apologize to him. I said, did you call him? He said, yeah, you know, and he's like, Dean, what do I got to do to prove to you that I'm really me? And that's how me and Harvey started working together.
Okay, Ed actually tells the story in his book, which is for sale upstairs. But I will let him tell it in his own words here, and then we'll talk about working styles.
Yeah, it
it was basically the same situation as Dean. Just getting back to the whole American Splendor thing, how I came to find Harvey or whatever. I saw that this documentary in the 80s called Comic Confidential. I don't know if anybody you've heard of it. And there was a little segment on there with Harvey, and in all honesty, I was reading X-Men and had a crush on Kitty Pryde. I wasn't too interested in that sort of thing, but it was kind of messed with my head a little. I didn't understand the comic, and this is around when.
You know about Harvey's film?
Yeah. This is around the time that the Doubleday book was put out, and so it actually made it to the local bookstore at the mall, and I was checking it out, just because I saw it on the movie, and I was waiting for the punchline. I thought American Splendor was his superhero name or something. But there wasn't a scene where he went in the telephone booth and came out with underwear on or whatever. But I stuck with it and started to really appreciate his stories, because it didn't take too long for X-Men to drive the well. So, I was trying to shop around some of my own comics a couple of years ago, and it wasn't having much success, and rightly so, because my writing is terrible. Terrible, Josh Neufeld. But so I decided to just start sending stuff to artists and writers that I appreciated, just maybe for some feedback to see, to maybe get some clues as to how I can change and get my stuff to a professional sort of quality. I sent some stuff to Harvey. The way I found his address, a couple of years ago, there was a Dark Horse book with a photo of you on the cover smiling, and there was a little address that was Kind of a fake magazine. yeah, like a fake magazine subscription thing. And I didn't know if it was a real P.O. box or anything, so I had an old issue of American Splendor that you put out on your own, and it had the same P.O. box. So I assumed that you still you still use that. I sent some comics to the address on the comic book cover, and didn't hear anything. But I just kept sending them there as part of a routine. When I would finish a story, I would send it to just X number of people, and he was one of the people that was on the list, and I didn't even know if it was a real address. And then, like, months go by, and I get a call in the morning. I'm a nocturnal creature. I don't like the morning. I don't function in the morning. But basically, it's the same deal with Dean. The guy gets on the line. Hey, this is Harvey Pekar, but there is this Academy Award nominated flick. Made about the guy not too long ago, and I had to drag my buddies to go see it. And I have a buddy or two that can do a good Harvey Pekar impersonation. and I knew it was my buddy, but it wasn't. It was Harvey. And he said the same thing that he said to Josh, basically. When the time's right, we'll do something or whatever. Didn't you, in your own thought process, revisit Dean's story? Absolutely. Of thinking it was someone else?
Absolutely,
Because after, I assumed it was my buddy, and then immediately, after it clicked and it was hard, I just thought, this is just like American Dilemma. This is just like the Haspiel strip. And so about a year goes by, I do a 4-page story for the Album of the Year book. Harvey liked it. And I wanted it to be pretty great, so I worked on it constantly I did it in a week. But it was literally like 12, 14-hour days. So I would have a quick turnaround so that he could see that he could rely on me or something. And then
towards the end of production of the book, he calls me and says, Ed, are you interested in doing a lot of work in a short amount of time? And I just asked for some hint as to what that short amount of time was. And it was, what did we need? 24 pages and like...
He did something before that, like a garage. About...
That was that 4-pager.
It's a 4-pager.
Yeah, that was a 4-pager. And then you said something like, I need 24 pages in 28 days.
And just so you know, he gave me the 4-pager first.
I know, man.
And then I was going to draw it, and he's like, Ed's already drawn it. I'm like, what? Anyway.
I didn't want to step on any toes. I didn't know about it, I swear.
It was all about Eve, so.
When he called me that second time to do that 24-page, it was around my birthday. So I decided I'll celebrate my birthday like a month or two later. And then, set to work on that 24-page comic. Had to pencil like 2 pages a day. Because I'm still, I was a newbie, and he couldn't completely trust that my pencils were in order or whatever. And so I had to get everything approved first, and the U.S. mail isn't the most reliable thing. So got into the pencil pages. It's a good thing too, because my drawings of Joyce are so awful. Is she here? I see her.
Oh, no.
She came and saw you and left.
Didn't you like drive up to visit him and take actual pictures of everybody for reference?
Well, it's a hard. Joyce wasn't around. Yeah.
Also, just so you know, a 24-page comic strip written in Harvey standards is really like a 50-page.
It is. There's a lot of words. There's a lot of words, and there's you could definitely expand the amount of pages by pacing it correctly and everything. But honestly, I didn't want to step on any toes. I didn't want to break any of his panels up or anything like that. I wanted to try to get this thing as good as possible in the 28 days that I had to work on it. So we did that and everything. The album yearbook comes out, and Art calls and says, "Yeah, Ed, you want to draw a graphic novel for me?" And it was no question, of course. And that's what we're working on now. It's called Macedonia, and it should be out around this time next year. Yeah.
Okay, with that, Lee, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Macedonia, what it's about, the idea behind it.
Yeah, well, Macedonia is about the now independent country of Macedonia, which is used to be part of Yugoslavia. When Yugoslavia came apart in around 1990, gained its independence, and but there was a lot of tension between the Albanians, who made up about 25% of the population, and the Macedonians, who were Slavic, and made up most of the population. And so anyway, with that in mind, my movie was going to be shown in Columbia, Missouri, and they sent me money to come out and talk, lecture along with the movie. So I did that, and I met the sister of the woman who was showing the movie, and she was a student at Berkeley, California, and she was real interested in this Macedonian situation. She was taking political science at Berkeley, and she was especially interested in peace studies. And she was getting hassled all the time by guys who would say, "Oh, don't you know war is inevitable? What are you wasting your time doing all this stuff for?" And then, so she came up with the idea. The example of Macedonia, where a war had been averted, and she wanted to do and she wanted to do a thesis on it for college. So she was going to go over there, travel over there, and you know, research why forehead had broken out. And so I said, you know, would you mind taking some notes on that? I think I'd like to do a comic book story about that. And so she went. She was there a month, and she sent me back, you know, like 140 pages worth of notes. And it was great, you know. I mean, and she really laid it out, you know, how they avoided it, what the problem was between the two, you know, ethnic groups and everything. And so I used that as the basis of this story that you know, gave to Ed to illustrate. And also, another reason why I sort of did this thing on Macedonia was, I don't know if any of you know Joe Sacco. He's a wonderful cartoonist. And he did some stuff about Yugoslavia too, about the Bosnian War. And but Joe does a lot of, he does like journalism in comics. He's like kind of revolutionary that way. But he tends to feature a lot of violence. So I wanted to do this thing, you know, where there was like, it was about Yugoslavia, but there was no violence. You know, showing that it's possible to have no violence in Yugoslavia. So, you know, that's another, you know, Joe Sacco kind of partly inspired me to do this. And Ed's doing a beautiful job. Just beautiful. Ed's just getting better and better so fast, you know. Well, Dean got real good real fast, too, after I got the time to do this, you know. Got the okay to do this. Dean made a quantum leap. Got to be much better artist.
I think it's the same.
No. That's the same thing. I think it's the same as the thing that did.
I think I did some good stuff before that. Well, that's different.
Dean also did like one mini series for Marvel.
Oh, I did some stuff for Marvel and DC. I did Night Falls on Yancey Street, a Thing miniseries that I've been working.
Right, so you essentially done some longer format.
Yeah, that's all right. The Quitter is, what, a 104-page book with 96 pages of comics content. And the Thing miniseries is 128 pages. And then my own personal work I consider to be my ongoing, you know.
Right.
But in terms of one story, this is like my second longest. And that's the hardest part. I think Ed's dealing with that, is keeping a consistency. Because that took me about, what, 8 months to draw? Something like that. Should I talk about the Quitter right now? Or?
Go ahead, Rob.
All right. Well, I mean, what Harvey and I had, I wanted to do a longer piece with Harvey, so I've only done a couple of small 1-pagers and 3-pagers and stuff like that. And then I hooked up Harvey with Ted Hope to get the movie done. I kind of had to convince Harvey that there was this film producer who I knew was interested, could be convinced, talk to him. And I think Harvey had some history with other producers wanting to make a movie version of American Splendor, and it just never panned out. So I think he was a little jaded by the whole Hollywood idea of, yeah, sure, go ahead, send a producer my way. Except this guy actually walked the dog and did the job. He did a great job, and far surpassed any notions I had for an American Splendor movie. And I don't know how many folks saw it. It was pretty unique and like great movie, you know. So, as Harvey will say, he wanted to know how he could pay me back within reason. He taught me the word reason, that sentence alone. What he could do for me back, you know, because he's a mensch. He's a good guy, you know. So I said I'd always want to do a longer piece with him, a longer work. And I had some gigs that I was meeting deadlines on, and I got wind that this guy, Jonathan Bankin, was just becoming the new editor of Vertigo. And Vertigo's an interesting imprint. You know, they do their Swamp Things and the Hellblazers and whatnot, but they also kind of try to push the envelope in other directions with books like It's a Bird. I don't know if you've heard of that book. It's kind of an autobio piece about a Superman writer, and I don't want to give away the punchline, but some of it has to do with a disease that a relative has. Anyway, so I knew that they were open to, you know, trying new things. And I got together with Jonathan Bankin, and I pitched some ideas. One of them was doing a longer graphic novel with Harvey Pekar. And he was like totally excited about that idea. So then I called up Harvey, and I was like, Harvey, what do you want to do? We can do it. It's longer. And one of the ideas we talked about was doing a graphic novel about Jewish boxers.
Yeah.
And Joyce was in on that. They come up with some. Didn't you also? Weren't you in on that a little bit with that idea?
Well, that's what we.
That was the original.
Well, they wanted Harvey to do superhero.
Well,
Or might be.
it wanted to be.
And then it was going to be guys in tights, and then we kind of worked out the guys in trucks, and then we did the Jews in trucks.
But ultimately, what they wanted was.
And I got all these books, and then pretty soon it just turned into Harvey beating people up.
Basically, that's true. Which nobody knows about. Anyway, I think that what they were really concerned about was like, could Harvey fictionalize, write fiction? And you know what, Harvey can't write fiction. Okay, I think he tried to, and you dabbled in like that Bizarro thing. The Bizarro thing is still about you anyway. Yeah, everything's about, you know, and I think ultimately he just returned to what he does best and is write about himself. Only he hadn't written about the first 30 some odd years of his life. Ergo, the origin of Harvey Pekar, which is this, quote, prequel to American Smarter the Movie in a way. And what a fascinating story. Who would have known that Harvey had a really good right hook and beat the hell out of people, you know? Which, you know, if you follow his work, it's just fascinating, like, how did that happen? It kind of explains where he is today, but how did he get there? And that's not the only thing that the book's about, obviously. And I guess I'll let Harvey talk about that. But it took me about 8 months to draw. I remember sitting down, I had gotten a 62-page handwritten manuscript of this man's origin in life. It was the most daunting thing I ever had to read and consider in my head. To interpret someone's life. You know, if it was Superman, you know, you just, whatever, you draw, you know, there's a lot of work there, but to me, I was kind of afraid to draw from birth until, you know, the first 30 some odd years, and it jumps about 25 years, and you can read all that work, you know, in the comics that have already come out and been collected, and then it has a nice little denouement. So what I realized I had to do, and I had 96 pages that turned to 62-page manuscript and paste it into graphic novel form, and I realized what I had to do was to make it kind of my story so it could be yours, the readers, to universalize it in that way, still maintaining it being Harvey's life. And I hope I achieved that.
Are you doing a real good job?
Dean, you talked about getting 60 pages from Harvey. And Harvey, in the movie, it showed you drawing stick figures and doing breakdowns for people. Is that still the way you work?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's turn it back over to Josh hasn't talked for a while. Josh, how did you feel when you first saw Harvey script? And how do you feel now when you get more comfortable with knowing the way Harvey is and really looking for it in your art?
I think probably my comfort level is fairly similar because I had a whole history of all the other comics that he had done to sort of see the treatment that the artists generally give to his work. Other than Dean, I think everybody else pretty much tries to keep the work as not static, but unstylized and sort of straightforward and very much like the mundanity or quotidian aspects of life are it's important for the artist to also translate that and keep that aesthetic as part of the experience of the work. So I didn't feel like I was under an obligation to be really dramatic or experimental in my layouts or something, but I just wanted to sort of keep it very human and, you know, really use the art to serve the story more than anything else. And that was something I was really comfortable doing. I think the thing that's really different and fun about working with Harvey is you do get these breakdowns of how he wants the story to sort of work, which is basically like these figures that look sort of like a chair with a head on it, and just some word balloons above it. And it's very basic, but there's a lot of room as an artist within that to work in terms of, you know, what sort of details you want to add and how you want to augment the surroundings or whatever. And it's a nice, for me, it's a really nice challenge. It's like collaboration in its sort of purest form. And, Harvey's also incredibly generous in his, I mean, he pretty much loves everything anyone does for him, and very easy to work with on that level, so, except for me.
No. The Critter was a great experience for me. I don't think except the fact that he changed my art style maybe better. I don't think that we had any differences. But I remember when it was the second job I did for Harvey, way before the Critter, was a one-pager. And I remember we had like a 45-minute argument after I drew it about what I had drawn. And basically I had drawn, it was Harvey overhearing a black guy talking to a black woman. And he did not like the way I drew the black people. He thought I was a racist.
No, that wasn't it. I thought you drew him as being way too old.
Oh, is that what it was?
You know, the same word.
Well, I remember we had
I take part of the blame for that, because I should have mentioned that their age, because it came out way different with their being old than with their being.
Well, I remember my argument back to you was, I may be drawing them one way that I'm uncomfortable with, but look at the way you're writing them, because I remember the way the dialogue was pretty. Anyway, we had. That was the only static I ever had with Harvey, basically.
One page.
That's not.
Okay, and this one's for, for Harvey, Ed, and Dean. Both the Quitter and Macedonia, the backgrounds may be more important than just the stick figure would convey. And I was wondering how you guys worked through that, if you provided Dean with pictures of
Well,
to find.
actually, like, well, Ed got pictures, and you should work with pictures, references if you could. The woman who wrote the script, you know, the notes and everything like that from Macedonia also provided him with, she gave you a lot of pictures, right?
She did a lot of work on this thing, you know, how many pages of notes did she give you? 140 pages of notes. She sent me about close to 100 photos, and on the back of each photo, she sort of plotted out her course in the story. So, you know, she would like label it, you know, one, and then, you know, she would write what pages of comics, you know, is covered, and so there's really no excuse for me to screw this thing up. I need all the help I can get with the Macedonia story. I've never been out of the Eastern kind.
As far as with Dean, you know, I mean, I was trying to get him to come to Cleveland, you know, to take pictures and stuff like that, but he never came, so I just went over it with him, you know, like on a panel by panel basis, you know, talking about, you know, what houses we like and stuff, giving him a verbal description of them and everything. It was okay.
In terms of reference and whatnot, 96-page story, there are some pictures of Harvey in the graphic novel that show when he was younger, like being a kid to a teenager in his early 20s. I didn't even get to see these pictures until I was on page 50. So once I saw them, I was like, oh. I did an okay job, like in interpreting what I thought you might look like. So I had to keep that consistent. But yeah, Harvey definitely told me, I had some questions, like, what do you mean, was it Double House or something?
Yeah, Double House.
I had some questions about some stuff he was writing about, but honestly, the internet, you know, was very helpful. You know, I typed a lot of do with Ohio. You know, there's a lot of Ohio in the 40s and 50s and certain cars and whatnot. And trying to maintain that feel and get that vibe. But to me, as Josh was saying before, Harvey gives you a lot of leeway to like dramatize the story visually, and he basically sets the pace. But like I said, with my 62-page manuscript, I had to kind of pace things a little differently. I would even cut like a panel he wrote in half or into 3 panels sometimes, or take 4 of his captions and make that the one big panel, depending. And I had laid out the entire 96-page comic in 5 weeks, and then we went over that, I remember, and then once that was all settled, I went into execution mode for about 7 months. It was just all crafts and shit after that.
If I could just add something to that, as a someone who tries to tell my own stories as well, and working with Harvey has been amazing because what comes across very effortlessly to him in the scripts, in the way that they seem like they're just, you wrote it down, without thinking about it very much. When they're actually translated to comics and you realize his understanding of pacing, narrative, how to use silent panels, just not using like a lot of the crutches that a lot of that I know I certainly rely on a lot in doing autobiographical comics. For instance, I use lots of narrative captions that kind of explain or tell a story rather than just showing a story. And it's really it's a real skill that he has that's, I think, very understated and is talking a lot about the craft of comics.
Okay, I'm going to ask a self-indulgent question now. In the real world, I'm actually a museum archivist, and I'm wondering what happens to all these scripts. Do people send them back to you in file?
No,
or?
I make Xeroxes of them, and I send them to the artist. And then I don't know, I lose them, you know. And I know they're going to be worth money, or they are worth money.
We have them. Every so often, some guy with a ponytail and MBA shows up and says they want to come to archives and stuff. And the rule is that they have to wait till he's dead, and I need him to move all the crap out of the basement, get to the file cabinets where the stuff's being stacked, because, it's like, they were asking you for, this is like, you've had a couple of universities have hit you up for your papers before. It's like you're still using them, you know?
As an obsessive myself, I have copies of every script in every thing that Harvey's done, and every sketch I've done.
They're in the living room under the mittens.
I keep mine in a file cabinet, but that'll work too.
Okay, the Ransom Center pays a lot down in Texas for archives. Okay, I got one more question, I think, for Harvey, and then we're going to open up for questions from the audience. And I'd asked you upstairs approximately how many people you thought had drawn you over the years?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe around 30. That's just a wild guess.
About a year or two ago, Josh Neufeld emailed me. Yeah, you should. I don't know why he does this, because I don't know where he finds the time to do this, but you had archived, you'd gone through every Harvey Pekar story, and in an Excel file, you figured out all of the artists, how many pages they did, all this stuff, and I'm like, why did he send this to me? And I'm like, nobody's paying him to do this.
I told you I was obsessive.
He's got a disorder, so. But it serves that question,
I don't
so.
remember, but it was like
It's probably like 50.
All right.
I want a copy.
So he made an educated guess.
He knows better than me.
And the final question, I assume people send you, I know people send you submissions, these guys were talking about,
Yeah.
out of the blue. And I was wondering,
Just today.
The people come around.
You got an artist dream.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you enjoy this after all these years, if you still feel a certain fritz-on when you open the envelope.
It's nice. Well, it's not. It's nice to see now. I've got a group of people that not only do I think I'm working with a group of really accomplished artists. I mean, there are several more guys that I work with too, and these are really, I think, top of the line people.
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and mention some names?
Well, like Frank Stack. Every once in a while, I work with Jerry Shamray. A guy who I've worked with since 1974 is Gary Dumb. And you know, I've worked with some really good people that I don't work with anymore, but you know, along the way I've worked with a bunch of good people.
Joe Sacco, too.
Yeah, Joe Sacco, yeah. Joe Sacco's excellent. And I just, I don't really need artists as badly as I used to. You know, it used to be a real hassle for me to be able to get together enough artists to do, you know, like a 60-page book. But now, you know, these guys are so good, and they work pretty quickly, you know, and so you know, when I get, a lot of times, you know, I'll get some stuff from people that's really good stuff, you know. But I mean, it's like my primary, these guys have been working with me for years. Even Ed, you've been working with me for a couple of years, right?
2.
Yeah. So,
Which is like half Ed's life. I shave
So
every Friday.
my primary loyalty, I feel like my primary loyalty is to the guys that I'm working with, especially now. I mean, a lot of these guys, they work, you know, when I was putting out my own stuff, and you know, I didn't pay them very much money at all. I couldn't afford to. And now that I'm making more money, I figure it should go to them, you know. So you know, when I get the real, I get good stuff from people, but I have kind of an ambivalent feeling about, you know, I mean, it's like it's good, and it's good enough for me and everything like that, but, you know, but still, you know, like if I, you know, give the assignment to this guy, then I take money away from that guy. So I try, it takes a lot for me to start working with a new artist.
Okay, I'm going to follow that up. Actually, something strange occurred to me. So has anybody ever sent you like bizarre submissions like the funny animal Harvey Pekar or the all-nude American Splendor?
No, really, I don't think I've ever. I don't know. Somebody might have said, in all the years that I've been doing it, that I can't recall. But
There was a Mr. Brown drawing of himself as a bunny coming to you.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, well.
Those are classic.
Okay. Does anybody on the panel want to say anything, or should we just open up for questions? Anybody? Questions? In the yellow.
Harvey, how did you learn or teach yourself how to do storytelling through panels and comic form?
Because I was real familiar with comics. I read, I don't know, that's the kind of way I just automatically did it that way. When I thought to do a script, I didn't write a theater type script like, you know, most comic book writers will write a theater script. But I thought, you know, if I divide into, you know, the page into, you know, squares or rectangles and stuff, put captions at, you know, where they belong, you know, at the top and stuff like that, and then had the dialogue coming from the characters, plus a little maybe description in the, you know, in the panel, you know, what I wanted in the, you know, the panel to look like or something like that. I thought that would be, you know, that would be easier. And also, doing it in a storyboard way helps you time the story better than if you're doing it, you know, and pace it better than if you're doing it, you know, in a theater script.
I'm sure that somebody must have a question. Tough audience.
We're that thorough, though.
Yes. Surely. Whenever. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is actually about the movie I saw a little while ago. You're pretty happy with the interpretation of the director and all the actors?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I thought they did a wonderful job. And you know, I mean, and especially in view of the fact that from what I can tell, like, what other comic book artists say, they really dislike what, the film industry does to their work. But I had no problems. It was just unbelievable. It's great. I mean, the people from HBO that financed the film didn't even come out to watch it be shot. It was left in the hands of Ted Holt, the producer, who is a super competent guy, knows the movie business backwards and forwards, and recruited a wonderful staff. And together they got together a really good cast. I mean, it was like, I could have never dreamed that it would come out, like Dean suggested, I could have never dreamed it would come out as good as it did. It came out wonderful.
Joyce, can I ask you as well?
What did you think? Because you would be
Well,
present.
we got paid. And that was the bottom line on it, really. But we've seen American Splendor produced theatrically about 4 times, and I have a pretty good sense how it would play. Plus, a couple of people have done some filmic adaptations and bits and pieces. And so I had a lot of confidence because we weren't just working with an individual director, we were working with a husband and wife team, and they kind of got the idea that American Splendor, because they're also building this on our cancer year, the book Harvey and I did together, but this was really a movie about marriage. It wasn't just about some lonely guy, doing his comics on his own. It really was about marriage, and was about a relationship. And, the sessions that we had together at the meetings and stuff like that, talking about setting it up and storytelling, these were very, very good listeners. And that, it was spooky because there were, we had some near misses with other directors, other people who had options, and they kind of wanted to do this freakish thing like, oh look, a working class guy with a library card, how interesting. Or the people who couldn't understand the difference between comic book and comic as in stand-up comic. So, we knew almost from jump that this was, with Harvey didn't know this. Harvey didn't catch on until much later, until after he'd seen the movie a few times. So this was a good thing. It was pretty depressing.
I'm way slower than you.
But it was, it just felt right this time around.
If I could follow up just on that question, because as an artist, I've always found it fascinating to read his stuff, to compare all the way the different artists in a book, illustrate him and Joyce and other recurring characters. And I think that often gets overlooked in like critical discussions of his work, is just the way each artist sort of brings whatever they have to the table to it. And all working towards the same goal, but bringing their own styles and visions with it. And I think that was, to me, one of the most vital aspects of the movie, was that was what they understood about this idea of the multiplicity of Harveys that there are out there. That there's the real Harvey playing himself, and there's the actor playing Harvey, then there's the actor playing the actor who played him theatrically, and then there's the cartoon versions of him in the movie, and of course, lots of shots of the different artists who've drawn him over the years, and that was sort of the meta aspect of the movie. So that was an unspoken part of it, but really vital to the overall thing that is American Splendor. So that was something I really loved about the film.
Okay. I'm going to go to her first tonight. Okay. Don't make it easy, Paul. Don't make it an easy one.
That's short. That brings to mind a question I have for Harvey. How do you decide which artist for which story? Like, do you ever write a story with an artist in mind?
No, I try and
Sounds like
best-
Harvey.
Harvey asked how we actually choose artists to the story.
No. Yeah, I try and write the best stories I can, and then I think about matching them up with an artist. Some guys have, some guys aren't going to be available when so that cuts it down a little bit. Some guys do comedic stories better than others. Some guys do serious stories better than others. Some guys, may know a particular area of the city or geographical region better than others, so they have a better feel for what they're doing there. I take all kinds of considerations like that into account. But I'll tell you, working with the guys I'm working with now, I think that I would feel pretty confident about giving them any kind of story. I think that they're versatile and they're real bright, and that that they would maybe there might be a little difference. Maybe one would be better than another on a particular story, but everybody can handle them at least competently. I feel really lucky that I'm working with such good people.
Question right here.
Oh, yeah, and in the movie, it portrayed that you and Joyce met through a visit and not long after you got married. How long was that?
We decided to get married the day after we met.
Now, my question is, how did you make that decision?
He'll marry anything. I was literate, I was available, I was female. We actually, on our second date, we picked out rings, and on the third date, we got married. We did talk, and we did correspond. This is before the internet. This is like actual letters and some phone calls. And it helped that we had both been married before and had learned what really counted.
I'd like to draw those letters into a graph now.
I cut up a bunch of the phone bills and made them into a Valentine. But no, that was the deal. We just figured we kind of negotiated it. We sort of figured we'd work it out later after, and we didn't have this naive assumption like, oh, you like the Beatles, I like the Beatles. We've got so much in common. We just figured it was going to be a struggle every bit of the way, and that we would, just didn't take anything for granted.
That's very impressive. You can make the decision that heavy in 2 days.
No,
How many years have we been married? It's been like 20-something.
We corresponded
23
and talked on the
years.
phone for months.
It was a couple. It was it was about 4 months. We corresponded, but I met you in March and we were married by May.
Yeah.
So we didn't.
Because
I went as soon as I realized I was getting married again. I went home.
It was before August. It was August of the year before when we really started corresponding. So that's the time, and then we started,
something like that. All I know is that we argued. We argued, and then one day I called him up and said, "Shut up and sit down," because I was going to sell you. And then I was traveling through town. I agreed to stop off in Cleveland. The next day we were getting married.
Wait, you used argued in the past tense?
Steve, considering you've been asking me, this is in the future for you too. Just watch. Asking our advice.
it's true.
Right here in the yellow room.
Well, first of all, my wife and I dated for like 8 years before we got married, so it was very different. I just don't understand it at all, but you guys, it worked out. Harvey, the question I have is, I know you've been doing kind of the last several years a lot of stuff that isn't autobiographical, like Macedonia, some biography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of an amorphous question, but how is your working process different? How do you find that that's very different stuff to write, or is it just kind of work the same way, but people have different names?
It's like, you know, in the beginning, maybe when I would write all these stories in first person, but still, in some of them I would feature other people. And so that's, I mean, you know, like when I wrote the thing called Unsung Hero about the Vietnam guy, I just, you know, I interviewed him and I wrote down what he said, and you know, and that's the way I used to do it with, you know, when I would be the, you know, the protagonist of the story. I used pretty much the same methods. I had used them previously in some of my earlier stories when I would talk about somebody. There was somebody.
This is kind of follow on to what you both said about meeting and marrying and everything, but the personal stories you write are so stark and real and taken from your life, and exactly the opposite from what many authors do, where they're trying to kind of fend people off and keep their own privacy. And so, you know, a lot of your books are kind of like the original Osborne's show. You're inviting people into your home and your personal life, and you have more control than maybe you would if you let a person with a video camera in, but it's so personalized. And I was wondering if you find that weird stuff comes back to you as a result. You know, people read the books and they pick up something and they meet you and you're like...
That's how we got a kid. We fuzzed it a bit in the movie because Danielle was young, and we fuzzed it a bit in the stories that Harvey wrote, but it's because well, first that's how I got a wife. He's had a distribution problem. I couldn't get copies, and I wrote to him asking him about getting copies from my store, and we ended up corresponding and marrying. But yes, when somebody knocked on the door and they wanted to show Harvey some comics, and they brought this little girl along, the little girl asked me if I'd be her mother and if she could move in, and that's how we got our daughter.
Was it really Frank's dad?
No, it wasn't really Frank's
No,
dad.
it wasn't. She didn't want it to be.
No,
She didn't want it to be her.
Danielle will talk about it now, and eventually Danielle will do her own comic. Well, she's doing comics. She's going to do some comics.
She better.
With you.
And she better not draw the characters like Sailor Moon.
No. Yeah, but, I mean, that's part of that's for her to tell. But, yeah, that was one of the, I said that to Bill Gaiman. I said, what's the weirdest thing a fan ever gave you? I said, a child. We got a kid.
Do they come back with do people come back with reinterpretations of your personal stories where they think something else is so much more important that you never even noticed?
I've had about 5 women pull me aside and say, I'm the one that broke his heart in that story about the Davis Baker. And it's never the right one. The real one has no idea that she's in this, but you know, all these women like to lay claim to dumping Harvey.
Your question is interesting as an artist too, because I've often, sometimes I'll get a story from Harvey that I'll illustrate, and then I'll have this weird feeling of like, well, should I, you know, if it's, let's say, a really sad story about, or he meets for his cat or something, or I don't know, something, you know, that's kind of like a personal thing that people talk about, because it's not like we socialize on the phone that much other than when we're going to work together. So I'll do the story or be working on it, and then I'll also have this kind of strange feeling of like I'm prying if I actually ask him anything about it outside of the parameters of the story itself. Like, is this fiction? I mean, I know it's nonfiction, but is it still like are we intimate enough to sort of talk about this stuff? You know, how you felt about something. So I always get this kind of weird shyness around it, and I just try to go with, you know, my own feelings about it, and then sort of leave it there. You know.
That happened to me with the Quitter. I know. I just realized right now, like, you're right. Harvey is so personal with writing that you don't. Well, for me, it's just like that's the story. Mm-hmm. But when I read the Quitter before it went to print, and it was just like all in front of me. There's stuff about his parents in this, obviously, throughout. And then, I'm not giving too much away. It's not like, you know, Star Wars or something. Darth Vader's father. I wanted to know more about what happened to his parents. I was like, wait, it's not in, and I drew it, and I took 8 months and whatever, and I did it. And then it occurred to me, I wanted to know more, and then I asked Harvey, and because I had this question about it, and it messed me up when he told me the answer. And I was like, why isn't this in the book, you know? But why didn't, it occurred to me to think about that when I was doing it, too. So it's weird how it gets blurry, you know? Anyway.
Right there, what? Harvey, are you still in contact with Robert Crumb?
Yeah, very occasionally. You know, he lives in France, and
Sure.
he comes over here, but he never comes, he avoids west where I live. It's too depressing. I don't blame him.
What did you think of his film, the Crumb biography?
I thought it was very good. I will say that, you know, that his years in Cleveland were left out of there, 1962 to 1966. And those were really crucial years for him. I mean, that's when he got married. Well, that's when he first, you know, started going out with girls. And then got married. When he first had a job, you know, it was when he first lived on his own. And that stuff wasn't covered. Yeah, I think I know why. Because Terry Zweikoff, the guy who was a director, actually wanted to interview me about this stuff. You know, but when he called me up and he wanted to interview me, he was in New York and I was in Cleveland.
You were going through chemo.
Huh?
You were sick then.
Maybe I was sick.
He also didn't have any dough to fly.
He couldn't come out.
Yeah, he didn't have any money.
He didn't want to spend the
But you
money
were
to come
really
to Cleveland. I didn't want to spend the money to go to New York.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Because nobody thought the movie was going to go anywhere anyway.
Crumb, that's the reason Crumb, you know,
That's why he made
went along with it in the first place, was because Terry had made a film before that on a string, you know, band group called Louie Bluey, and I guess I've never seen it. I guess it was probably very well done. You know, I mean, I've since learned that he's a very good director, but you know, it was like, you know, one of a million real good documentaries that nobody ever watches, and I figured this was going to be another one. And Crumb figured this was going to be another one too. You know, Crumb. That's why Crumb gave his consent, and like, you know, when it became a kind of a semi-hit, he was walking around in disguise with flaws of beard on and stuff like that. Yeah, he was. He didn't want to be bothered. He can't stand being bothered by the public. Hates it.
I guess I just have a question a little bit related to that. When you became more successful or found, you know, more interest directed at you without having to really search for it or struggle for it, do you find that changes your ideas of what kinds of stories you want to tell in any way, or does that change your perceptions?
Well, I'm so you know, obsessive compulsive that I haven't accepted the fact that you know, that in the minds of many people, you know, I've made it. I'm always worried about where the next dollar's coming from and all that, and I'm always catastrophizing, you know, thinking the worst. And that's the way I operate. And, you know, it's kind of pathetic, I guess. Because, I mean, I know, you know, like I should feel a lot more comfortable and better about myself than I do. But I take a lot of pills, but I still can't do anything about it, you know. And I know, you know, it's not rational. But that's the way I'm programmed, and I just got to work around it.
Okay, we're starting to run a bit over time. Any last questions?
Years ago, you've done I was wondering if you still do that, critiques on comics. Years ago, I guess you did something for Comics Journal, where you did Mouse, and I thought you were like, I knew you got a lot of angry mail at it. I don't know, it seemed like you were, because the way you responded. I liked a lot the way you attacked it literally, and I know a lot of people at the time, because I was in art school.
Yeah.
studying the comic artists. And people didn't want to touch that because it won Pulitzer Prize, and it was like, it was a literary thing, and you're very bold for actually wanting to actually say, well, there were some things that didn't work on a literal level, or some things that I borrowed a lot from, and all that. So it was refreshing to see that somebody actually, I think, because that was kind of the talk we were talking about, like people still how to legitimize comics, and that was like, that's what I feel like you do it. You actually treat it on the same level as something, a great piece of fiction. If you're going to do it, I mean, it should be able to hold up if you compare it. So it's just one.
Yeah, a lot of people really got mad at me because of that. You know, I feel like, you know, and I may be completely wrong about this, but I feel like, you know, some of them are, you know, still, you know, like, you know, thinking, you know, like, well, why does he have this attitude towards people or something like that, or what's behind it, you know. But I thought the work was flawed, seriously flawed, and I come from a very similar background, and I found it kind of offensive in some ways. You know, I mean, my parents are from Europe too, you know. They didn't go through the Holocaust, they came to America just before the war. But, well, that's all I'll say.
I think the question too is if you were going to do any more types of criticism like that?
Oh, was I going to do more? Yeah, I do book criticism now, and I do, occasionally, like, for book form, for example, I wrote a couple of reviews of graphic novels. But, you know, I'll tell you the truth, there aren't really a lot of good graphic novels that I see. But on the other hand, like today at this show, you know, people are coming around and they're giving me their work, you know, that they self-publish, and a lot of it is really good. And it's just for what it's worth to you, you know, like, you know, if you despair about the future of comics, there are still plenty of really good people out there. It's just that they can't get their work out.
Sorry, what's that anthology you're supposed to be editing? Is that new work or what?
What? Oh yeah. Well, Harvey Neufeld has hired me to. You know, they put out a best shorts. You know, for many years they've been putting out best short stories of 1951, 52, like that. And they hired me to do best, like graphic stories of the past year or so. So I'm going to be working on that with, somebody else is sort of going to screen some of them out, and give me like what they think are 125 best short stories, and I'm supposed to choose between them. I have a kind of an ambivalent attitude about that because I don't really, in a way, I feel funny about like judging it, saying this work is better than that work, in other words, and including some and not including others when, there's just, like a hair difference. But on the other hand, they aren't paying me well.
I'd like to let that slide. This is perfect time for this, but I am going to ask one question. Are you excerpting from longer works like the McSweeney's that Chris Ware put together did, or do these have to be short?
I don't know. I don't know yet what's going on because the person that's supposed to be, working with me and getting me the preliminary group together has not done it yet. So, and I haven't been able, and I don't know if she is sure yet whether, how she's going to work it. Like, I asked her if she was going to consider one panel entries, and she wasn't sure. So I guess, just have to work with it. Get to it.
Okay, well, we've gone about 15 minutes over. Unless anybody has anything they're absolutely dying to ask in a crowd, I would suggest that we let everybody get back up there and go up and buy their books and talk to them some more. And so let's have a round of applause for our